Hi everybody, welcome back. Today's video we're going to discuss how many slings is too many slings. I'm just going to be going through doing some maintenance, feeding, bit of changing water bowls and stuff like that. But I thought whilst I was doing it, we could discuss how many slings is too many slings. Or is there such thing as too many slings? I suppose better keep watching to find out. Now I've just readjusted the camera so you can see less of me and more of what I'm doing, but hopefully you can hear me clearly. Now, basically, I wanted to talk about how many slings is too many slings. And the reason behind that is, as you can see, I've got 7 at the minute. And some people might think that's not that many. Some people might think that's too many. But it all boils down to you. And the first category I want to speak about is time. Have you got time to deal with all the slings? If you have, brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. And then the next category is experience. Now, slings are tiny, very, very small, quite easy in general to maintain because they take up a small amount of space. They need food twice a week, every other day, depending on how you're wanting to cycle it. And they are not big and scary. However, because they are so small, they can be hard to find in their enclosure. And on top of that, they can be very fast, which that speed can make them very hard to keep in the tubs, or if they do manage to get out, it can make them equally as hard to find. Once they're out, wait, that went a bit crazy, bit hard to find once they're out. So it's experience. Have you got experience dealing with slings? And are you prepared to learn? And if you lose one in your house, is he going to freak you out to the point where you can't sleep? Now obviously in an ideal situation we don't lose any, but it is possible. It can happen. It is a possibility at the end of the day. It's like I said, they are super fast. They can be like massively bolty, especially teeny tiny slings, and that can make for losing a sling around your house somewhere. And are you okay with that? Or are you prepared to put the work in to find them? So there's that. But also the fact that they start out tiny doesn't mean that they're going to stay tiny. Obviously all of them grow up. So we have to account for size. And not the size they are now. What size they're going to be when they grow. Because the size they are now, like you can see here, I've got 7 on this tiny table, and it's not an issue. But these 7 will not fit on this table at all when they're fully grown. They will require bigger enclosures, so you've got to account for the size of them. So do your research, find out how big they are, what type of enclosure they're going to need as adults, because some species have pretty similar requirements and they get to similar sizes, but then other species like your Lasiodora parabona can get pretty big, can get to around excuse me, 11 to 12 inches. Now typically they don't, but you've got to be prepared for if yours does. And have you got adequate space for that? Now, whilst you're thinking about spacing, you've got to think, is it arboreal, fossorial, terrestrial, or semi-arboreal? If it's arboreal, then it's going to need a taller enclosure than it is wide, so I've got the height space. If it's fossorial, it's going to need wide but deep enough for them to burrow. And then if it's terrestrial, it's going to need wide with a bit of a mix. And then obviously you've got semi-arboreal, where, wow, this one's done a good web job. Good web job. I don't want to ruin it and take the water ball out. I'm going to just fill this one whilst it's in the enclosure. What was I saying? If it's terrestrial, it's going to need a mix, and then if it's semi-arboreal, again, it's going to need width with some height. Now, semi-arboreal, some people don't think it's actually a category, but for me, things like your green bottle blue, they are kind of semi-arboreal, and having the right amount of space for them, for me, would be a big factor, because you've got to make sure that they've got the width to wander, but yet the height to climb, should they want to. So yeah, you've got to account for the space. And then I'm going to come back to experience, but for a different reason. Now, experience with slings, growing them on, is one factor. However, experience with adults or mature is another. You want that experience because you're going to have to rehouse them. So are you able to, say, move on slings 2 or 3 times before they end up in the forever enclosure? Like all the slings you see in these tubs started in these ones, and I've had to move them onto these, and then from these they will go into an acrylic tub. I've got one up here, I'll show you in a minute. They'll go into an acrylic tub, and then from then a lot of mine tend to go into exoterras, but from these containers they'll go into something like this, and then they'll go into an exoterra of adequate size. Generally from here they go into the forever home, but it's not always the case. So it's, are you capable and experienced enough to rehouse them that many times? So you gotta think of that as a factor. So back to the question at hand: how many slings is too many slings? My honest opinion is there is no exact number. It's down to you. If you've got the time to deal with them all and the experience to care for them properly and the space to house them properly, coupled with the developed experience of keeping adults and rehousing, have as many as you like, as long as you can accommodate them and look after them. Now, slings can be fairly inexpensive to take care of. Like a tub of fruit flies will last a good while for slings, but then as they get bigger, they're going to need bigger and bigger prey. It's still quite inexpensive. I know one of our local pet shops, you can get crickets, hoppers and things like that, and it's 3 for £7 on the containers, which is okay value, and that will keep you going with a couple of spiders, a couple of teas a week or so. But then you've got to think, have you got space for the feeders, and what are you going to feed them? Because most feeders will die because they are not fed, people forget to feed them, or they are fed the wrong stuff. I know a lot of people that have reptiles use the gut loading foods for the feeders and they die off. So, but that is because they end up impacted. If you are going to keep them and you want them to last a while, you're better off to feed them just fruit and veg, and then little flies everywhere. Feed them fruit and veg, and then gut load them just before you're going to feed them off, and they will survive for a lot longer. As you've just seen, it's not took me very long, and I've fed and watered all of these, but I do have to do that 2 to 3 times a week, depending. Sometimes when I tap the fruit fly tub, quite a lot come out. When that happens, I tend to leave it a little bit longer. I will just use a bit of smarts on that score. I'll just check the tub, think right, there's quite a few flies still in, so I won't feed them that day, but I'll change the water. Or if they've gone through them quite fast, I might top them up, but depends on how many have gone in. I do like to keep notes myself. I do have my own made record sheets, which on here I record the humidity requirements, the temperature requirements, and the adult size of each spider. So that helps me, that's my due diligence into making sure that I have adequate spacing for the tarantulas that I keep, and that I am making sure that they are getting the environment that they require. So yeah, the moral of the story is there's no such thing as too many slings, as long as you can look after them. Hope you enjoyed the video. Catch you in the next one. If you'd be so kind as to give us a like and a share, maybe even drop a comment, or hit that subscription button and that notification bell so you stay up to date and don't miss a video.